Welcome back, everybody. It's week 10, episode 10. I am your host, the infamous ex-chief of the East Cleveland. It's the week of Monday, June 3rd. And I'm at my favorite location, and I'm not here very often by myself, so I had to take full advantage of it, make a recording. This was actually on part of my intro, the cigar lounge. So this episode's going to have the final segment from Tony. I had received the records back from the Parma Police Department, so I'll have my opinion afterwards. So why is Tony's story told before Don's story when this is about justice for Don? I'm glad you asked. In order to understand the Don Pasela weird death investigation that was concluded, or her death in general, the fact that it was basically not investigated, I think the only way to fully understand it is through Tony's story. You have to, and rightfully so, Tony has the right to have his story told also. But I've been asked, well, hey, you're spending a lot of time on Tony's story. And the reason is I think you fully have to understand Tony's story to get a full grasp of the totality of Don's death and the lack of investigation that occurred for Don. So, with that being said, we're gonna go ahead now. We're gonna transition into Tony's interview, and this is where we're talking about essentially the we're gonna get into the death scene. And we're going to go ahead and transition into Tony's interview from here.
You're going to go to jail. Why? For being a defense witness? And again, supposedly you're allowed to come to court. A witness does not have to talk to attorneys, does not have to talk to the media, but supposedly is allowed to come to court. She said she was coming to court, she was bringing documents, and she said Judge Gall is fair and he will let me testify. Judge Gall, she said he likes the steak, not too much seasoning. You know, he really wants the hard truth, and we can go to and we can show the jury, we can prove. We're not going to allege misconduct. We're going to go hard facts. They're forging her name on the evidence log. There's an affair with this government witness, Clover. And she was going to blow the whistle on all this stuff. She said Dan Kasaris was one of the biggest pigs she ever met, that he tried to have sex with her, that he was using his position as a prosecutor to extract sexual favors from women. A criminal defendant cannot consent to a sexual relationship with a prosecutor who could put her in jail. And this is what Mark Bennett and Dan Kasaris have made a career out of, using their authority to harass and exploit for sexual reasons interns and younger administrative colleagues or criminal defendants. Absolutely sickening.
Was it just backing up? So you're defending yourself at this point. I mean, do you have like any? Just a curious question on my mind, because you seem to do very very well at it. I mean, did you have any experience with this whatsoever? As far as
no, but Dawn helped me. I mean, I would have never done it without Dawn. Dawn said, "Okay, you're a real estate guy, right?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Have you ever made a presentation?" And I said, yeah, so I used to, before the government ruined everything I worked for, I would go to a company, my nice suit and tie on, and have some of my colleagues there, and we'd say, we'd like to take over running your building. Here's what we're going to do. These are the 5 things we're going to do. Here's some projections. If things go well, we think we can lower your costs. We think we can increase your revenue. Okay? So Dawn said it's the same thing. It's a sales presentation, except the jury is the customer. The judge is the umpire, or whatever, the referee, or whatever you want to call it. We have to convince them. And how do you do it? With hard facts. Dawn was like, look, I don't care what people's political beliefs are or the religious beliefs. Most people, especially if they're in a jury, want to try to do the right thing. They're going to weigh evidence. They're going to take it seriously, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like Dan Kasaris forgot to tell everybody, oh, by the way, I'm banging this witness that I'm presenting as a fact witness. This is a total fraud on the court. Because Clover's really working inside the prosecutor's office. This guy, Jay Schlacken, he's a lawyer here, too. He's great. He's Dan Kasaris' lawyer and Catherine Clover's lawyer and Susan Kasaris' lawyer after they were getting separated because of this lady in the middle. So Schlackett's running interference, as a lawyer for all this. And they forgot to tell everybody. But most jurors want to be fair. So Dawn really put her faith in the basic fairness of the jury, that you got to give them the hard facts, not too much, outrage and adjectives. Let's just go hard facts. So no, I didn't know how to do it, but Dawn told me how to do it, and we did it. We teamed up and did it together, and our goal was to correct any other injustices that's wrong. I mean, nothing destroys any sense of patriotism or confidence in the country or confidence in law enforcement more than these wrongful convictions, because they did it to me, and I just don't want it to happen to anybody else. But the thing is, they ruined my family and friends' faith. I mean, people couldn't believe this. I mean, my colleagues were like, Tony, this is crazy. You don't do mortgages. How on earth are you involved in the nation's largest mortgage fraud case? The prosecutors used to say, so people would go to Mark Bennett, and they would say, look, Tony's innocent. Wrong answer. Can't say that. We're going to indict you if you say that. And they used to tell them, look, this guy's a nerd. He's a workaholic. We wish he went somewhere else. Trust me. But they'd come in on Monday morning and their desk would be piled. You couldn't even see them. Piled high with papers. We got to do this. We got to do that. This guy we got to make a proposal. This customer wants an update. We got to, they were like, trust me. He didn't run another company or go to some other company. This is what he did. Wrong answer. You can't say that. And witness after witness said that. And then the FBI wouldn't write down their what they actually said. I had a lady who I'm friends with named Angelica Fry. She's married now. But anyway, she was around forever. She'd be like the perfect person to tell you what actually was happening. She was one of our original colleagues. And she's like, this is crazy. I was there. What do you mean, mortgages? And Tony was a nice guy. And if a customer was upset, Tony went ballistic. He made sure that they were satisfied. He took care of it. Not because we're angels and saints, but because it's good business. I live here. I don't want to go to some restaurant and some lady, thinks that we screwed her over. You know what I'm saying? Because some guy took the refrigerator he was supposed to leave. I live here. This is my community. I'm a hometown guy. So anyway, long story short is they would tell them this, wrong answer. So this starting with a conclusion and working backwards from there is very dangerous. It's ridiculous. And you're a homicide investigator. You're looking for hard evidence. How do you solve a homicide? You did it through actual hard evidence, And, can we get forensics? Can we get, digital records or whatever, and go from there. So it's really disappointing that this start with a conclusion and work backwards is the way we did my case.
And so I just, and I'm not disparaging Dawn whatsoever. I'm just trying to set the timeline up. So you're about ready to close your trial. I think you had conversation with her that hey, if you're nervous about this, you don't have to come in. I don't need you. But she says, no, I want to come in. I want to testify for you. And I believe, just tightening the timeline up in my own head, her parents see her at 9 p.m. the night before.
Yeah, the night before. They see her the night before. I had talked. Let me tell you what happened. Okay, so the second trial is basically part 1 and part 2. Dawn's like, prove that you're innocent first, and then I'm your last witness, and I'm going to talk about misconduct because I have personal knowledge. Tony, you might think there's misconduct, but stick a sock in it. I was there. I know what they did. I can tell the jury that I saw certain things, and so I said, you're right. I know she planned on coming in because we practiced. She asked me, or she gave me some questions to ask her. She wanted open-ended questions. Dawn could talk. You didn't have to talk for her, right? She wanted to be able to talk. So anyway, so she was the last witness and she didn't show up. And the Judge Gall said, do you know what this lady looks like? And I said, yes, Your Honor. He said, well, go out and maybe she's in the hallway. We got, and she wasn't there. And the judge basically said, look, this was like an afternoon. He said, look, the trial's ending tomorrow. This is it. So I have other cases. Actually, you guys screwing around with this mortgage nonsense in my courtroom for 2 months. I got a lot of other cases to adjudicate. I'll spend the rest of the day on other matters and we'll come back in the morning. And if she's here, great. And if she's not, the case will go to the jury. So she didn't show up the next day. It's hard to talk to people from prison. She had called the court, not through the jail phone, which is recorded, and Kasaris would listen to that. But she called Judge Gall's chambers, and I talked to her a couple of days before. She said she was coming in for a couple of reasons. One, she wanted to move on with her life and tell everything she knew. And she also said, they know I'm helping you now, so I have to come in or I'll be indicted for stealing documents. And so she wanted to come in and be seen as a whistleblower trying to do the right thing. And that's all Dawn was trying to do. It wasn't like I was paying her. She was just trying to do the right thing. So when she didn't come the next day, Judge Gall said, that's it. Closing statements. This is going to the jury. That's it. So actually, Dawn passed away after that. So she didn't show up and then was found dead. So her folks were with her the night before. She was okay. And then the next day she's found dead. So then the jury just got the case. And then Judge Gall calls me back in and says, and I thought maybe there was a jury question or something. And then, he announces that Dawn was found dead in her apartment. I was absolutely in a state of shock. I still can't believe it. Even all these years later, it was absolutely beyond belief that she was found dead. So it's either the greatest coincidence ever, or there's some serious investigative work that needs to be done. And so, at the time, I didn't know about these different cell phones and all this other stuff. I just absolutely was shocked. The other thing is, she was threatened before she died. So if I threaten somebody, if I threaten you and then God forbid you're found deceased, anybody who threatens anybody right before their death, you would think would be questioned, right? Or the fact that Dawn was supposed to be a witness in the case. I when I got out of jail, went to the medical examiner and I asked them. And they said, we didn't know she was a witness. We would have put that in the report. So apparently nobody ever told anybody, or they didn't do it. You could have found it. It was online, a public docket, that subpoena. But Dawn was subpoenaed in my case. So they're saying, well, we didn't know. We would have put it in the report. And then the medical examiner said, well, we didn't know she worked at the prosecutor's office, or that would have gotten heightened scrutiny. But there's a picture of her prosecutor's office badge. So, you don't know who to believe anymore, really. But the fact of the matter is, this young lady is found dead as she's supposed to come to court. It's unbelievable.
And again, I don't want to put anything out there that doesn't need to be out there or might. But the parents left at about 9, and she was on the phone with an unknown person, or do the parents know at this point who she was talking to at 9 when they left?
We believe it's a guy named Marty Maurer. He's got a record a mile long. We believe he's a government informant. She was dated him briefly, and they had broken up. He's on my website. We are out at the guy. She also called a guy named Jason Samiti for said this is a couple of days before she died, that she was very afraid and needed advice, didn't know what to do. He basically said, I can't help you. And he, we only found out because he admitted it to a lady he was dating later. So, and then now he doesn't want to cooperate with us. There's a lot of very fishy things here. If somebody, asked me about Dawn, I would tell everything I know, but Marty says he's moved on and he can't talk about it. So it's very fishy. We can't force him to talk. We need law enforcement to do it, and they won't take the case. So, but anyway, the answer is somebody was in that apartment. There's 2 cups of coffee out there, and something went wrong in that apartment. I just don't believe this is a natural death, particularly with her computer that went vamoose.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The prosecutor actually went to Dawn's parents at one point looking for a computer, correct?
Correct. So this is exactly right. So right before Dawn died, Kasaris, Arvin Klar, and perhaps Mark Bennett, it's not clear, were at Dawn's folks' house saying, we are looking for Dawn. We're here to help your daughter. And Ed basically said, come back with a search warrant. But they wanted to go through the parents' house and look for computers. And then, of course, the day Dawn died, Dan Kasaris destroyed his computer and got a whole new laptop. So it's extremely fishy. I would love to know his cell phone coordinates. There's another thing, too, which is how does Kasaris know that Dawn passed away? So she dies that night, right? Or the police come at 6 o'clock. The next morning, he tells Judge Gall, and they announce it in court. So how does he know? So there's some type of shenanigans with Parma, and probably not the officers who responded, but these higher ups, and Kasaris, they're in cahoots, and they're still in cahoots because Bob Corey's the safety director who's buddies with Dan Kasaris. So buddy, we're just going to turn, and it's just, it's just a person's life. No big deal here. They spend more time writing a speeding ticket in Parma than investigating what happened to Dawn. So it stinks to high heaven. And it's outrageous that it wasn't even looked into, but I believe that left to their own devices, I do believe that the police probably would have looked into it if somebody didn't call and say, stop. And the reason is that the report says the case should be further investigated. And the medical examiner has a summary, a 1-page summary, and he also says the case should be further investigated. And then the sheriff, a guy named John Morgan, a Detective Morgan, went through this a year ago, and he said it should absolutely be reopened and interview all these witnesses. There's a lawyer named John Patrick, and this is great, by the way. Kasaris' name isn't even Kasaris. It's actually Radarowitz, okay? So we got Paul Logan, who's a financial advisor, who's Dan Kasaris' brother, who's actually Radarowitz. John Patrick, who's a senior partner at Reminger, downtown Cleveland. John Patrick is his middle name. He's actually Radarowitz. They all changed their names. They work together, and you wouldn't know they're brothers because they changed their name. This is fantastic. So you can't make this up. So anyway, John Patrick has been overheard talking about the murder of Don Pasela. So I mean, okay, if you're a homicide, you have experience investigating homicides. If I told you, hey, there's a suspicious death. Oh, and by the way, there's a dude who's saying, that she was murdered. Wouldn't it pique your curiosity? I'd like to get that guy in the back at the police station and see what he has to say, right? I mean, this is ridiculous. So nobody's doing anything. I mean, Kelly Connors, who's one of Dan Kasaris' witnesses, he prosecuted a lady named Tammy Keaton, and Tammy Keaton was the government witness while she's sleeping with Dan Kasaris. Again, that's the most recent iteration. It lasts September and October. He's having sex with the witness, and this is just endless. So anyway, the point is all these people should be interviewed. Kelly Connors is saying that Kasaris is always talking about Dawn in a very sexual way, about what she was wearing. She's deceased. Okay, and years later, he's still talking about her. So something's up. I think Dan Kasaris and Bennett too, I think they're like Evel Knievel or the Great Wallenda. Okay, remember that? Where, we want to jump over, 40 Greyhound buses. And then we're going to jump over 50. And then we're going to jump over 100. I mean, at some point, the guy jumps over too many and can't survive. Or the Great Wallenda keeps, it's a hurricane. I'm going to walk across the thing anyway. And then he dies. I mean, I just think that Kasaris is so insanely reckless. So Kelly Connors says she made voice recordings of Dan Kasaris talking about all this. And we can't get any judge to order her to produce the recordings. So, I mean, on our own. I mean, listen, I'm an indigent guy. I was in jail for 10 years. I lost my house. I lost everything. And we're piecing together a murder investigation. I'm really a real estate guy. I really am good at, like, leasing your buildings and, lowering your electric bill. But we've had to get this crew together and put together a citizen detectives, as they say, at Seeking Justice to piece this together. But these people need to be questioned by law enforcement.
And just so everybody knows that, I use BCI multiple times. It doesn't cost the department anything whatsoever to turn over an investigation. There were several cases that were homicides that I felt were priority, and I knew that the department didn't have the resources at that point to go back into that cold case for whatever reason. And by all means, use BCI or use the sheriff's department. Sure. I mean, me personally, I would rather use BCI over the sheriff's department, but it would not cost Parma anything. They literally would write something out on a letterhead saying, hey, we don't have the resources. Can you please take over this case? And BCI would happily do it. So it's not even like Parma is out anything. And BCI still...
No, it's a total cover-up. It's because Bob Corey loves Dan Kasaris, and they know that if this is investigated, that it probably would lead to cases being reopened and accountability for what these people did to Dawn. I mean, they totally destroyed her spirit and crushed her spirit, but you're exactly right. We have an email from, I think his name is Dan Snyder at Ohio BCI, and they also have forensics and technical capabilities, and they have that maybe some of the police departments don't have, so they have not just investigative, like interviewing witnesses. Anyone can do that, right? Any department probably could have a detective interview people, but some of the more technical stuff or the DNA testing or some of the good cold case forensic stuff, BCI has those resources. And we have an email that, yes, we would be glad to accept this case. It warrants reinvestigation as soon as Parma sends it over to us. So it's ridiculous. I mean, Parma has spent more time arguing with us, refusing to turn it over, than just either investigating or turning it over. I mean, it's unbelievable how stubborn they have been, but they're protecting their buddy, Dan Kasaris, the safety director, Bob Corey, who, by the way, is a total criminal. His cousin owns a software company that got a no-bid contract from Bill Mason, to track all these prosecutor office cases. I mean, this is a Cuyahoga County special. The Corey family warrants, if I have time, I'll do a deep dive blog into that. And all these journalists in Cleveland want to do stories about, Girl Scout cookie drives and all this crap. This is what needs to be covered. The threat to the public is these insane prosecutors who do not follow any sense of constitutional rules or laws. They do whatever they want. They're a bunch of thugs. I don't think there's a mafia anymore. The mafia has morphed into the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. They're a bunch of gangsters extracting money and bullying people and threatening to put people's wives in jail if they don't say that the computers that they turned over went vamoose. I mean, what the heck is that?
And I don't know if you've seen any of my previous shows at this point. I refer to the media in Northeast Ohio as the fourth estate of Northeast Ohio, because there is no investigative journalism in Northeast Ohio media. There is none. They will take whatever government agency, and I don't even know how many times I would put something out, and they would still get it wrong. They literally would just I would tell them, hey, this is what happened, and they would still somehow manage to get it wrong, and they just take whatever is given to them. There's no investigative journalism in Northeast Ohio.
Right, it's desperately needed. Yes, I've watched your shows. No, I couldn't find the violation on the police in the back of the car with the license plate that was blurred. I mean, yeah, okay, so I admit I have no idea what might be wrong there. But no, you're exactly right, and we desperately need investigative journalism. I mean, I've talked to people, and I've said, I've talked to these guys. Hey, you guys want to win a Pulitzer Prize or no? I mean, there's $20 million of restitution that's been basically stolen by the Cuyahoga County prosecutor. By the way, here's a great thing. I love this. I love the internal auditor of Cuyahoga County. I said, hey, listen, they're stealing the victims fund. I have the ledger. We're buying airline tickets and hotel rooms. Judges ordered criminal defendants to pay these supposed victims money. The prosecutor is stealing the money. And don't take my word for it. And then we have people that, like mortgage fraud defendants, have written to these supposed victims because, like, I supposedly stole $46 million, so I owe all this money to all these banks. We write them letters. Hey, how much do I owe? No, you don't owe any money. Well, here's the restitution order. We don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so I asked the county auditor. Now, you probably recall that we threw out the old structure of Cuyahoga County, the old, Jimmy DeMora, county commissioner thing, and have this county executive. So I called the internal auditor of Cuyahoga County, and I said, I'd like to share. Oh, we can't audit the prosecutor's office. You're the auditor, and you can't audit the Cuyahoga County? No, rule, code section, this and that. So O'Malley's a great reformer. So here, you want to be a reformer, one thing to do would be let the friggin' auditors. Do you know that the county prosecutors, according to some of these reports, they haven't balanced their checking account in like 25 years? They don't even really know how much money they have. I mean, it's ridiculous. That and they're putting innocent people in jail and destroying people's lives all day, every day. And then what do you get from O'Malley? Is this, oh, shucks, we'll look into it. I mean, they're criminals down there. I don't know what else to say. It's absolutely ridiculous. So the Cuyahoga County auditor, the internal auditor that's supposed to, oh, no, we can't do that. So what are they there for? What are you auditing? If you can't audit, it's absolutely ridiculous. So there's no mechanism to do it. And so back to your point about the journalists, which you're exactly correct. An investigative journalist, really focusing on misconduct that affects people's lives, destroying people's lives, is very important. But it's not that they can't; it's that they don't want to. I mean, Signal, Cleveland. I mean, some of these organizations that are raising money and trying to get money, they don't want to do it. And I've had journalists tell me, "Look, Tony, I know you got hosed, and there's wrong stuff with Dawn, but I can't burn the prosecutor's office. When somebody gets shot at 79th and St. Clair, I got to go, they give me stuff. They leak stuff to me. We don't have the resources. I got to do. So they all tell me they don't want to burn the prosecutor's office because a lot of the TV stories that are on are from there. And they want to, and they said, look, your case is not worth it. That's why my case is covered by townhall.com and Seeking Justice. And, I've been on all these podcasts and all these shows. I've been on TV shows, Coast to Coast AM, all these things that are not here.
Right.
Okay, they're not in Cleveland because this power structure that we have is designed to protect themselves. And remember, you got these judges. I mean, Don Nugent is Exhibit A. I mean, you think a guy would be curious. Your orders are being violated because the government's not sending the restitution to where you said it should go. No, they don't care. Or the prosecutor sleeping with the witness. What, isn't that like walking into court with your middle finger in the judge's face? No, he loves prosecutors. Yeah. He just wants to talk to Jay Milano about the Irishman movie and all this Danny Green stuff. It's crazy.
Well, the fact that she's also being investigated. I mean, both things are a huge Brady violation. I mean, the fact that she's being, Giglio Brady, the fact that she's being investigated, the fact that she's sleeping with the prosecutor. Yeah, I mean, that's
sleeping with the prosecutor, getting money from the prosecutors, undisclosed. The government's allowed to pay informants, but they have to disclose it.
Right.
But sending her to law school, they didn't disclose that. She's actually an employee. See, the thing is, a fact witness, I mean, you know this, a fact witness is supposed to come to court and say what they saw. I saw Tony leaving the Dairy Mart or whatever, or I saw, Tony's red cars, smashed into this, that's a fact witness. Clover was the prosecutor's girlfriend, And she was privy, she's sitting in meetings with other government witnesses. She's going through bank documents. That's an expert maybe, but not a fact witness. But they presented her as a fact witness because Mark Bennett said without using perjured testimony, it, quote, jeopardized the outcome of the case. So it's in the, quote, interest of justice to put me in jail. I never bothered anybody in my life in law enforcement. And they're spending all this time and effort to put me in jail and drug test me, even though I don't do drugs. And the guy basically told me at the Oriana house on 55th Street, if I did drugs, they would drug test me less because it's a pain in the ass to find drug addicts because they're never in the same place and they don't answer the phone. So it's my fault because I don't do drugs and I get drug tested more. So go figure.
So I just want to quickly go back to one. I requested through Freedom of Information Act, which I'm sure I'll never get, or I won't get it through without jumping through a bunch of hoops. But I asked for the documentation on Don's case from Parma. So I still haven't seen the actual incident report. Have you actually seen the incident report yourself, or?
Yes.
All right. So
yes, it's on the justicefordawn.com website under the letters to Parma. I attached some of this stuff, so it should be available, but I can email it to you or make sure it's easier to find.
But it sounds like, and again, I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds like from what you're stating, most of the investigative work, which wasn't much, was actually done by the coroner's office.
Correct. The coroner sent somebody to Dawn's apartment. He said there was 2 cups of coffee. He saw that phone picture you showed. That was actually a coroner, not a police thing. By the way, the other thing is, so the fire department, we're trying to figure out how did Dawn get from her apartment to the medical examiner. So the Parma Fire Department says, well, we don't have any records. But then the medical examiner gave us records from the Parma Fire Department. So then we sent those to Parma and said, what about? Well, we don't know anything. Nobody knows anything. So a lot of the stuff has actually been produced by the medical examiner that the other people say, oh, shucks, we don't know anything about it. So, I mean, one thing about this cover-up, it's a slapdash affair because you've got other departments producing records that the other department said don't exist. So it's bizarre. But the answer is yes, there's an incident report. There's also, it turned out, a mortuary service transported Dawn's body. And also something else that you may want to opine on based on your experience, but the Parma General Hospital dispatches a doctor to Dawn's apartment to pronounce her dead, even though the medical examiner pronounced her dead. So no investigation, but 2 people say she's dead.
See, I can tell you from, so when you have a death in Cuyahoga County, there's a couple of ways that it can go. If they are under medical care, if they're 80, 90 years old, and you, like as a responding officer, I go in there and I see all sorts of heart medication, they're 80, 90 years old, I can attempt to, get the prescription bottle and call the doctor and say, hey, I have a decedent here, or is he or she under your care? The doctor's like, yes. Okay, well, it's, the person's expired. Do you want me to call the medical examiner's office? Now, that doctor has the authority to essentially call off and say that this person has passed. And then I don't have to necessarily call the medical examiner. But most of the time, at least in my experience in East Cleveland, most people were not under doctor care. And so you would automatically just have to call the medical examiner. So from that point, the medical examiner has to send someone out to do their crime scene investigation. And I'm trying to remember when, in relation to Dawn's death, at some point they actually did start training their guys pretty well in forensic pathology. They would actually have actual investigators that were trained come out. But prior to that, it was just hobo schmobo would get dispatched out, and they would take some photos, some cursory photos, look for medicine, whatever, and then transport the body. And so I have to do some digging. I can't remember when that changed. But I mean, from what you're telling me, it doesn't sound like there was much of an investigation. So I'm assuming it was prior to them actually being trained to come out and do death investigation. But I guess luckily, at least there's some photos from the medical examiner's office, and it's mind-boggling to me that there are no photographs from the police department. And I did watch the Seeking Justice episode, and I do concur with that gentleman. I can't remember. I don't know if he was a coroner or a homicide detective, A lot of times you come on scene and the body has been moved by EMS, but in Dawn's case,
Sergeant Jackaloni,
yes,
the guy from New York. Yeah. He has experience. Yeah, he said, let's just go. Let's do some police work. Let's open the file and get cracking. Let's interview some witnesses. Yeah.
So, but in Dawn's case, no EMS was notified that we know of, correct? Or you're stating that there might be now.
A mortuary service. We had to fight for this for years. We were trying to get these records. Finally, a physician friend of mine said, call the coroner and ask for the face sheet. How the hell did she get there? And it said a mortuary service, which just doesn't add up. I mean, you wouldn't have an ambulance on scene. And again, this is a younger lady. This is not, it doesn't make sense. But then there were Parma Fire Department records. So there's references to an ambulance or Parma, but it's not clear what happened. It's just not clear.
So, I mean, if EMS shows up, then yes, they have the duty. Usually they'll put lines on to see if there's any activity. Sure. But the fact that her body was moved under these circumstances, to me, prior to being photographed, is very odd, in my opinion. I don't know. And again, EMS shows up on a scene like that where there is some lividity, or at least what I'm following from the other video show, that perhaps she was already in some sort of state of decomposition. Then EMS would just normally come in and put lines on. They're not going to move the body. So I don't. It's just, to me, that's mind-boggling why her body was moved prior to any photographs. But somebody took, and again, maybe it was the medical examiner. Now at this point, I thought it was the police officer that actually described the position of the body. Was that the police officer or the medical examiner?
I think it was the police that described the position, but the photos aren't that. It said her leg is on a chair, and it's not. And so look, their actions are inexplicable. There's no legitimate law enforcement reason not to get a Ziploc bag and pick up the cell phones and put them in a bag, pending the toxicology report or whatever. I mean, we're not talking about moving mountains over here. Put the phones in a bag and figure it out. Why are there 3 cell phones? I mean, that's unusual. Dawn had 1 phone. There's 3 in the apartment. Stuff like that, like the missing computer. I mean, there was enough red flags. And then the BAC is extraordinarily high. There's enough red flags. She supposedly died of alcohol, but there's no cup. Like, how did she drink the alcohol? She guzzled it right out of the bottle, right out of the vodka bottle. So, I mean, it just doesn't add up. And, I don't know if we can recreate enough of it or get enough information now to solve the case, but I believe it was eminently solvable before. The other thing, too, is this. She lived in Midtown Towers in Parma, which is a huge apartment complex. There was video surveillance. I mean, for the love of Pete, go downstairs, and the management office is like right there, right by Dawn's apartment. Do you guys have the footage from last night, or and just see? There's literally cameras right near where Dawn's apartment was, apartment 201 in the place, and it's right off the elevator, so you could see. Did anyone rush out? And the aforementioned Marty had a key to the apartment, so maybe. He locked the door. I don't know. It's just not clear. Did someone go out the window? I mean, you could have eliminated that. So in other words, I'll give you an example. Like, the medical examiner didn't take pictures of Dawn's arms. So is it possible that there were IV marks on her arm? Yes, it's conceivable. Is it likely? Maybe not. But if you had pictures of her arms, you would know. We're eliminating that possibility. But by these knuckleheads not doing anything, you can't even eliminate these possibilities, so you're left with, well, it's not impossible, so it's conceivable. Did it actually happen? We don't know. So then let's get evidence and build what may have happened. It's ridiculous. This should have been done then. And again, this is a dead young lady. This is someone's daughter, and I cannot believe, law enforcement had enough time to have 20 detectives reading, interviewing my administrative colleagues in my office, or going through mortgage documents, and here's a dead person and you don't do anything. So, I mean, this is a complete misallocation of resources. We need somebody to put their foot down and say, this is ridiculous, that there's no time spent on the death of a human being. I'm Catholic, okay? Everybody, I mean, in my opinion, is created by God, and everyone is innately good. I mean, you don't treat people like this, for the love of Christ. I mean, how on earth could you go to bed and look at yourself in the mirror or anything, knowing that that's someone's, and you didn't, like you said when you started the show, the family, you can't bring them back to life, but the family's entitled to, this is what happened, or we've exhausted these other possibilities. We don't think there's foul play. I mean, Ed and Karen and their family deserve that. This is their daughter, and they were owed a proper explanation. I mean, this guy, Dan Syriac in Parma, said to Ed and Karen he was sending the file to Ohio BCI. He said, I don't know if they can do anything, but fine, we'll send it out. And then he made one excuse after another. Oh, the lieutenant has to sign the thing, the captain, and then it doesn't get sent. How could you lie to a family? Shame on these people. This is their daughter who's deceased. They've been through hell. At the least, they're entitled to respect and the truth. And send a thing to another agency. You don't want to do it, fine. But they're criminals in Parma, and they don't want to get themselves jammed up because they mishandled this whole thing. It's completely botched. And they don't want egg on their face, and they don't care about someone's daughter. That is ridiculous that the government is using its authority to hurt Dawn's parents and her family. This is heartbreaking. How can this go on?
Do you remember what the weather was like, or not necessarily?
Yeah, we looked it up. Yes, it was warm out, and so it doesn't make sense that the heat was cranked up. There was also baseboard heat, and the window was open. We suspect that the heat was cranked up to accelerate body decomposition, but again, can't prove it. Yeah, it was a very warm day. You wouldn't turn the heat up to 80-something to 85 degrees on a day like that.
And he's absolutely right, folks. I can't even tell you, there was actually several homicides that I investigated for the same thing, and that's why I was sort of wondering what the weather was like. The medical examiner did have a photo of the thermostat, and it was like 80. It was over 80 degrees, and that causes the body to decompose faster the hotter it is. And so criminals know that, and they'll crank up the heat in the house to make it harder for somebody to investigate the death scene because it's decomposing faster. And my other question was originally, was there any type of force that was discovered? But the window was wide open, right? The exterior window?
The window was wide open, and by the way, the gentleman who lives there now let me go in, and I took videos and pictures and sent it to Seeking Justice. But the answer is you could jump out that window. It's not that bad. I mean, I'm not exactly a star athlete, but I could have done it. It's not that far down. But again, the video surveillance in the building would have, if they would have asked for that, well, gee, at this hour of the night, someone's jumping out of Dawn's apartment. Or not. I mean, we can't eliminate these things because of this facetious failure to investigate. So we don't know. Is it possible somebody went out the window? Yes. Is it likely? I don't know. Maybe not, but it's conceivable. So because it's conceivable, we can't eliminate it. So one of the things, I'm sure you've done this as you've investigated, we want to eliminate, okay, that's out. Let's go over here. Let's follow this train of thought or this lead. So we can't really do that. But I could have jumped out that window. And especially these characters that we think were there were much younger. So they certainly could have done it. I'm not saying they did, but it's possible. That window opened pretty low, and you can close it, and you could stand on the ledge. There's like a ledge. So you could have jumped. Somebody could have gotten out that window. The other thing is Dawn was the first apartment on 201. There's a stairway like right across. I did it on my cell phone. I was out the door in 18 seconds. From her door to out the front door is 18 seconds. But again, video surveillance, you would have picked that up as someone rushing out, or we don't have that. But it's unconscionable that this wasn't.
And again, I have nothing direct. I don't necessarily know anybody that I can think of. Well, actually, I might know a couple Parma officers, but I'm not degrading Parma police. But I mean, even if this occurred in East Cleveland, I would say, hey, looks like this was botched, and maybe it wasn't intentional at first. Again, you would think that they would be doing everything in their power to try to correct it now, by even if they can't handle it, turn it over to somebody else. And so
right. I mean, business. I'm a business guy, right? Business is very humbling. You buy the wrong stock. You buy the wrong apartment building. You make a mistake. You open up an office. It doesn't work. I mean, you get your butt handed to you a lot. So you become very humble. But that apparently doesn't go with these clowns in Cuyahoga County. They're just going to stick to their guns. This is an accidental death, period. And it goes to this: start with a conclusion and work backwards. You're guilty. We're going to prosecute you. Oh, we don't have any evidence. Well, you must have done something. I mean, in my case, the lack of evidence became proof. Aha, he must be guilty. He hid the mortgage files. So, I mean, it's ridiculous that we don't follow the evidence, and that there should be, the law enforcement is very powerful. These folks are very powerful. They have power over people's lives. I didn't. I was a realtor, for God's sake. I mean, you could fire the realtor if you don't like me, or if you didn't like working at our company, you'd say, Tony, I'm out. I'm going to RE/MAX. But I mean, this is crazy that the government has authority over people's lives and it's being misused. And really and again, this is a death. If it was a fender bender and somebody backed into my car and it turned out it was the mayor or whatever, okay, whatever. Okay, I get it. We'll do a favor or whatever. I mean, this is a deceased young lady. So it's really upsetting to me to see how Dawn was treated. It's heartbreaking to see how she was treated. The other thing, too, in my second trial is Dan Kasaris kept saying, oh, she's an alcoholic and she's got a drug problem and she's dating all these loser dudes and everything. And I'm like, well, why'd you give her all the evidence to take home? Why'd you put her in charge of 1,200 criminal cases? If she sucks, okay, and I said, I'll take my chances with the jury. I think the jury's going to like her. I think she's great. And they're trash talking her. I'm like, you guys hired her. You put her in charge. What are you yelling at me for? You're the one who had her wearing a wire. I never knew Dawn. I wish I knew her in a different way. I think we would have been great friends because she was a terrific person. She was really cool and really interesting to talk to. But I didn't know her. You guys inserted her into my case. So you say she's so terrible. It's on you. So anyway, it's really heartbreaking to see someone treated like this.
And I do want to point. I did have one follow-up question, and just something that and it's more related to you and relative to you. And one of the documents, I've never heard of it, so I was just eager to ask. You refer to it as diesel therapy.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain that?
Okay. Yeah, diesel therapy. So when you are a federal prisoner and you're fighting your case, the government likes to ship you around, okay? To make it, you miss a deadline, you're done. And so what they would do is, Viola 322-38160, was my prisoner number, to the office immediately. So I'd go see the CO, the correctional officer, and I'd say, sir, did you page me? Yep, pack your shit. Why? Because you're being shipped. Where am I going? You'll find out when you get there. You know what a spit bag is? You ever heard of a spit bag where some of the prisoners spit, so they put a bag over your face? You can't even see. You can barely breathe. I'm shackled like a terrorist. Again, no criminal history, no violence, but they treated me like a terrorist. We're nicer to the Taliban, by the way, than to me. And they put you on a bus somewhere. My family didn't know where I was. Was I alive? They did this to me for months. After I won that second trial, I was in jail transit for something like 4 months. To go from Cleveland, Ohio to Ashland Federal Jail, which I think, 150 miles or something. It took months. I mean, planes. They flew me to Oklahoma City. They flew me to Atlanta. I was in some place called Lovejoy. I was in some place called Big Sandy. CCA. I was in some place called Henderson County, Kentucky. It was one of those places where the sheriff keeps the money over and above what they feed the prisoners. So you get like a tiny amount of oatmeal or cream of wheat. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So they shipped me around, and then even so much to even go to the prisons. Because the officers, when I got to this place in Ashland, they tossed my cell and they threw, I come back. I was a tutor teaching GED students, okay? So I never got an incident report in jail. I never got written up. I never had a cell phone. I never did anything I wasn't supposed to do, okay? I just worked on my case and stayed to myself. So I come back, all my stuff's all over the floor. And so they said, well, maybe just random. And then it happened again and it happened again. And so there's a shot caller at the higher security jails. So they said, you better go see this guy. And he said, Matt, are you doing something? I said, no. He said, you selling cigarettes? You bringing anything in? I said, no, absolutely not. He said, well, what are you here for? And I told him about real estate. And he said, man, that's BS. It's not illegal to sell a house. I'm like, listen, I understand. So luckily, these guys actually looked me up on a cell phone to see, was I a child molester? Was I, what was I in jail for? Was I an informant? And I went to trial. So they were like, all right. So they said, well, you got to go see the unit manager and find out why they're doing this. And in the high security prisons, you don't talk to the officers unless there's another inmate around. Like at the camps where I ended up, they don't, half those guys are informants. You do whatever. But they would say, well, go, I'll stand behind and you go. And so the guy basically told me, look, it's coming from Cleveland. Somebody in Cleveland doesn't like you. They're asking us to toss your cell. I said, how many times are you going to throw all my oatmeal away and pour the coffee out on top of my legal work and, throw my friend Melanie had to keep sending stuff in. He said, probably once or twice. If we don't find anything, we'll just leave you alone. And so I said to the guy, I said, so you're telling me that you're going to go throw all my stuff away one or two more times, and then after that, unless I do something wrong, which I understand if I do, that you guys are going to leave me alone? He's like, yeah. He says, somebody in Cleveland doesn't like you because we could care less about your case. And so that's Mark Bennett or somebody in Cleveland is doing that to me to make it hard. But yeah, they disrupted my legal work by shipping me around, and then you can't take stuff with you. You're shackled. So you got to ship your legal work. Oh, that's too much. Viola, you're only getting 2 green bags. You can't bring all this stuff. So I had to mail it to my friend Melanie or my private investigator, Bob Frederick, and I had to mail it back in. So it was absolutely torture. And some of the cops didn't care that I was working on my case, but some took it like a personal insult. And I asked the one guy, and I used to talk to these people because I just wanted to stay to myself. But I said, sir, what do you care? I mean, what if by some miracle I get released and win my case? They're not going to fire you. They're not going to shut the jail down. There's plenty of prisoners. It's like 2,700 people in this jail. I'm like, who cares? He's like, I don't like inmates that do this stuff. I don't like it. So anyway, it's really bad what happens. And so, being in prison is supposed to be the punishment. You're away from your family and friends. You lost your freedom. Not being tortured in prison. And it not only tortured me, but worse was my family. My mother didn't know where I was. Was I alive? They couldn't find me. And it was punishing my family and friends, and they were worried. And I used to try to tell people, don't worry, everything's fine. I'm reading books. I'm doing push-ups. Don't worry. But they didn't believe me, and they worried, and it was heartbreaking. I feel like this whole nightmare was worse on my family and friends than on me.
And most of the people that I'm aware of, as far as federal for financial crime, they usually end up in Morgantown, which is I've actually interviewed a couple of prisoners in Morgantown, and I honestly drove by it the first time thinking that it was a golf course because it was so nice
right
and
in
laid
the
out.
city. Right.
And so the fact that they're putting you in some other type of facilities.
Mark Bennett said that I was a threat to the public and I was not eligible to go to a prison camp. And they gave me so much time in jail. Generally, you have to have 10 or less years to go to a prison camp. And I had like almost 13 years. And so Mark Bennett, these people abused their authority. They totally messed with me and did everything they could to torture me. And yeah, they put me in seriously high security prisons. Now, luckily, the jail culture, which I knew nothing about, but because I went to trial, I was considered a badass mofo. Okay. And they said, man, y'all took them to the box. And I'm like, what? The jury box, and so they thought that was cool. And they were like, man, we'll give you some extra snacks. I'm like, no, listen, do you want us to beat the crap out of anybody for you because you went to trial? I'm like, no, please do not beat anybody up. Because normally it's 25 Snickers bars, but we'll charge you 10. I'm like, do not beat anybody up. I don't bother anybody. I just try to stay to myself. But in prison culture, I was safe at the high security jails because the inmates didn't mess with me. And even the officers knew that I wasn't going to cause problems for them because I wasn't a snitch. The cops in the jails don't particularly care for snitches. But diesel therapy is a mechanism to disrupt legal work and just harass you and put me in these different places. I was in all these different jails, and in these transit centers, you don't have any access to phones or emails. I mean, in Atlanta, the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, where Al Capone was, and me too, you get let out for like 45 minutes a day. So everybody's trying to make a phone call or take a shower all at the same time. It's same thing with Canaan. I was in the Canaan Transport Center, stuck there for weeks, and you can't contact anybody. So nobody knows where you are. Are you okay? It was brutal. Then I started winning my case. The FBI says they lied about evidence. The Justice Department said they lied. Journalists called to interview me at solitary confinement. And here's another thing. If you go to solitary confinement, you're supposed to be given either a discipline report, this is what you're accused of having done, or what's called administrative detention. You're being put in there to separate you from someone else. They never gave me anything. They just do whatever they want. Put me in solitary confinement. So, it's unbelievable what's going on here. Why? Because JP Morgan lost $46 million. JP Morgan doesn't think they lost $46 million. Of course, the bank was willing to play along with the prosecutors. They didn't want to be prosecuted. So this is really a disgrace. What's going on again? Not like, oh, poor Tony got screwed. I don't want anybody else to go through this in this country. I mean, what's done is done. I can't undo. I can't go backwards and, the real estate company's doing great. Go to the office tomorrow. But what I want is some accountability. This is not a mistake or a temporary lapse in judgment by prosecutors. This is a criminal activity. Mark Bennett and Dan Kasaris, my private investigator says, we have enough evidence. They should be arrested right now. Sex with witnesses, stealing restitution, lying, using fabricated evidence, perjured testimony. There's enough. This illegal thing with Dawn wearing a wire. They should be arrested. See how they like it. Let them go to diesel therapy. Let Mark Bennett sit in a jail cell. That's where he belongs. And if you want to restore confidence in the justice system in this country, you've got to have accountability for people that blatantly break the law. And this insanity in Cuyahoga County of prosecuting these cases that have nothing to do with public safety is a complete waste of time and energy. It's ridiculous.
And there is a petition. I'll make sure to post it in post-production. There's a petition. Is it to the Ohio Attorney General's office?
Yes, Dan Kasaris should be fired now. We shouldn't be getting more cases. He's lost computers in cases over and over again. Oh, shucks, we lost the computers. The evidence is complicated. I mean, he's lost them in all these cases. It's the same nonsense over and over again. Oh, shucks. He's got a case in Toledo that's dragging on. Well, we don't have the records. We can't get the evidence. And how do you know people are guilty if you don't have the evidence? So anyway, how do you know people should be criminally charged? So yes, we have a petition on change.org. By the way, Dan Kasaris loved publicity till now. I mean, he almost ran over a lady in a wheelchair to get to Channel 3. They were setting up a camera at one of these pretrials, dying for, but now they don't like it as much. Mark Bennett doesn't like it. But boy, back in the day, they like a moth to a flame. They loved all this media adulation and all this stuff. Loved holding court with journalists here.
And I found it very interesting when I was doing research again for this show. He is actually, so Mike O'Malley has asked, or he has recused himself a couple of times and asked for a special prosecutor. And guess who the special prosecutor is? It's
Dan Kasaris. Sure, and let me tell you, Dan Kasaris, Dave Yost loves Dan Kasaris, and so does O'Malley, because let me tell you, with Kasaris, you're getting a conviction because he's willing to do anything. He'll lie, he'll threaten witnesses, he'll fabricate evidence, he'll do anything. He has sex with witnesses, he's stealing money, he's destroyed computers, allegedly planting porn on people's computers. We've got multiple people telling me that. Like, he'll do anything. There's nothing he won't do. And the other thing about Kasaris, he's an evil genius because Bennett was running interference for him in the U.S. Attorney's Office. The FBI covers for him. You know, the FBI is involved in a lot of misconduct. So normally in a case like mine, if there was a rogue state prosecutor, you could go to the FBI or the U.S. Attorney and say, you know, like Bob Frederick or Kim Corral could go to them and say, look, we've amassed a lot of evidence. You guys should take charge over here. But because the U.S. Attorney's Office is up to their eyeballs in Dan Kasaris' criminality, they're in on it. So they're not going to blow the whistle, oh, we're going to clean this up. They're in on it. So Kasaris, even something like the Ohio Disciplinary Council, which disciplines attorneys that break the law, he's their investigator. So anywhere that you could go to have accountability, hey, the guy's having sex with witnesses, Don Nugent thinks it's amusing, okay? In federal court, thinks it's great. The U.S. attorney doesn't want to do anything about it because they're involved up for eyeballs in misconduct with Dawn and Bennett and all this nonsense. The county prosecutor, they love Kasaris. O'Malley and Kasaris are buddies. O'Malley and Bob Corey are buddies, the guy in Parma who won't release the file. Bob Corey has a blatant conflict. He was overseeing the medical examiner's office when Dawn died, and now he's in Parma saying, no, there's nothing to see here. I mean, this is absolute rubbish. And so it's hard because there's nowhere to go other than hopefully we can get enough public outrage. But literally, it's a situation where facts don't matter. The judges don't care. They had sex with a witness. Denied.
And people, just so you know, the FBI, and I know that Tony has said it, I've heard him say it previously, the FBI, everybody thinks, oh, you hear the FBI, oh, great elite investigative unit, everybody thinks. I'm just going to give you a small example on one of my homicides. It was actually on a Michael Madison serial killer in East Cleveland, and we had located the first victim in Michael Madison's garage, his car garage, like a carport. And so we knew the identity of Michael Madison at that point. We knew Michael Madison's apartment was right up the road, or right up, essentially right behind us, up on the second floor. The FBI gets there because they are actually looking for this victim. She was reported as a missing person, and the FBI took it over as their investigation. And so we're at the door, and the FBI is trying to force entry into Michael Madison's door. And I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? And they're like, well, it's exigent circumstance. And I'm like, what's exigent? What do you mean it's exigent circumstance? I said, I have a detective going right now to get a search warrant. Let's wait for the search warrant. There's no exit. You hear somebody screaming in there or something? I don't hear anything. Right. What's exigent? And so just letting you know, if you think the FBI is ethical and and I like a lot of FBI agents. I'm not discredit, but everybody just hears FBI. They assume that they're the elite and they're extremely ethical. They're not. They're just as fallible as everybody else.
My private investigator echoes you. It's gotten way too big. There's way too many of these people, so it's not elite anymore. And Bob Frederick is a former FBI agent, and there's another gentleman named Earl Pitts who's been helping us, and he's a former FBI agent, and both say that this nonsense never would have occurred back in the day when they were in the FBI. If they found out that the 23-year-old office manager was wearing a wire to get the defense trial strategy, they would have said, knock this off, and whatever these tapes are, we're turning them over to the defense. And if they lost my case, so be it. We're not engaged in this. But Jeff Kassouf, who's an idiot, this FBI agent, let me tell you about Jeff Kassouf. This guy not only knows that Dawn is wearing a wire, does nothing, this sort of, aw shucks, well, I didn't tell her to wear the wire, but I listened to the tapes, but I don't have them anymore because I sent them to the task force. So Kassouf would have you believe that the FBI can dispossess evidence that they don't feel like producing. Now, they're obligated under Federal Rule Criminal 16, anything with my voice on it, even if I'm talking about baseball, they have to turn it over. But Kassouf says, well, I don't have it anymore. I sent it to the task. Do you have notes? I don't know. So, but let me tell you something else about how stupid the FBI is. One of the lawyers asked Jeff Kassouf at one of my trials, how do you know so much about mortgage fraud? You're saying, I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy, but I did do real estate for 20 years or whatever, right? Okay. So I know something about it, right? And you're saying what we did is fraudulent. How do you know? And Jeff Kassouf said that he took a 2-hour online class about mortgage fraud. Well, that's ridiculous. He's an idiot. Arvin Clark was so stupid. You can't underestimate the stupidity of a lot of these people. He did not really understand what a realtor did. So we're talking about mortgage fraud and all this stuff. It's not, they kept saying it's a complicated case. It's not complicated. It's simple. There was no fraud. Nobody deceived anybody. Nobody took any steps to conceal cases. The mortgage company had something called Calyx software. When these loans were submitted, if the lender denied it, we didn't all say, oh, let's commit fraud. We're going to go and it's ridiculous. And they destroyed those computers because they don't want to show that, if someone wasn't approved. Well, there's plenty of other people just buy a house. We're not going to say, oh my God, let's stop and make up stuff. But Kassouf didn't know what he was doing. He took a 2-hour online class, courtesy of the FBI, Operation Stolen Dreams, it was called. And Arvin Clark didn't really know what a realtor did, because that was some of the questions I asked him. He was a witness, and I was the attorney for myself at the second trial.
Who was he working for at the time of your case? Was he with the AG's office under that task force? Or?
He was at Ohio BCI. He was a policeman, then a sheriff, and then Ohio BCI. But he was a county sheriff and headed up the task force. Then he went over to BCI. By the way, about corruption, one other thing. There's a guy named Leo Palabis or whatever who was on the Parma school board. This is great. So these guys would buy houses and then call their buddies and Frank Russo's treasurer and say, hey, can you lower my tax bill? So these guys would buy a house for say $180,000 and then get it revalued to $120,000 to lower their own taxes. And they're investigating me saying I committed mortgage fraud. So I wanted to interview these people and ask them, well, Leo, are you a victim of fraud? Because you bought it on Tuesday for $180 and then the next week it's worth $120. So what were you scammed? I mean, are you an innocent victim of a mortgage fraud scheme? These people are a bunch of criminals, and then Kasaris didn't want to do it. By the way, I subpoenaed Dan Kasaris' lovely wife, Susan, to come to trial. She's a realtor. She sold houses no money down with the same lenders. She herself, her and Dan Kasaris, North Royalton, they were buying houses no money down, selling houses no money down, cash back. I want to know why she wasn't indicted. I mean, when I tell you these people can stick this up there, and then Dan Kasaris was appalled. Oh, You're upsetting my wife. Well, what about what you're doing to my family? I want to know why you're not indicting your wife, because she's doing the exact same thing we're doing, okay? I mean, if a prosecutor is prosecuting a rape case, he probably didn't rape somebody the day before. But they're doing exactly the same thing I'm doing. I want to know why I'm charged and they're not. I thought it was relevant. So anyway, we had a rock'em sock'em trial. I did subpoena her, but then I didn't bring her in. And I was going to bring Arvin Clark back as a defense witness, but I felt like I had won the trial. And I did, but I told him to be on standby, Arvin, because I have lots more questions for you. He was a prosecution witness originally. But this is really a disgrace how that prosecutor's office runs. One other thing that could be done is to have much more transparency. These records should all be released promptly. There's all this nonsense where, oh, shucks, we don't have the records. I've been trying to get these tapes that Dawn made for 15 years. When they were prosecuting me, lots of enthusiasm. I never heard any of these excuses we hear now. Now, there's a guy in Washington who was fighting one of my records cases named John Moustakis. He said his kid threw up at nursery school. He needed a 6-week extension. No baby got sick during the prosecution. Then they said Christmas was coming up. They needed an extension. When did you think that was going to happen this year? When did you expect Christmas to fall? I mean, they didn't let me out of jail for Christmas. So now you've got this friendly bureaucrat, oh shucks, it takes a long time to get the records, we don't know. But when they were prosecuting me, press conferences, raids, SWAT teams, indictment, another indictment, a third indictment, TV journalists banging on my door, would you care to comment on the latest charges? We're going to put my customers in jail. We're going to put the employees in jail. We're going to prosecute the wives of the realtors because they put money in a joint bank account, so they're involved. I'm a racketeer, I'm a mobster. I got a criminal enterprise. My company's a criminal enterprise. Lots of energy and enthusiasm. Then helicopters, boats in the Cuyahoga River. You hate to think those realtors could swim to Canada. You got to get the pontoon boats out there. I mean, this is a joke.
I only laugh, and I'm not laughing at you, Tony. I swear, it's just your case. I mean, honestly, you probably got, obviously you did get screwed more than I did because you were in prison for 10 years. But just the similarity is what you're describing is just like mind boggling to me, and it apparently just keeps happening.
It's another day at the office. Destroying computers, hiding evidence, targeting people. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Sex with witnesses, misappropriation of funds. This is another day at the office. It's no big deal. And the reason you know it's no big deal is Don Nugent, the federal judge, he's nonplussed by the fact that, hey, there's a dead girl who was supposed to testify. Denied. Hey, I just proved my innocence at a second trial. Can I have a hearing in federal court? Denied. No big deal. Prosecutor sleeping with the witness? Denied. A guy named David Comstock, who's Dan Kasaris' lawyer, says that the facts don't matter. It doesn't matter if Kasaris had sex with Catherine Clover because I was exonerated in the state case where she testified. But she testified in the federal case. What about that? Oh, it doesn't really matter. You can't show that if she would have testified or not, you wouldn't have been convicted. It's conjecture. It's ridiculous. They never argue the facts, and the courts enable this crap. And so it's absolutely ridiculous that this is going on. But it goes on in Cuyahoga County because the journalists that are supposed to be the watchdog are lapdogs, because the mechanisms that you're supposed to go to report serious government wrongdoing, they're all closed. I'll give you an example. The Ohio Supreme Court Disciplinary Council, Mark Bennett was fired for lying and harassing an intern and attacking some lady's breasts and all this inside the prosecutor's office. And Kim Carell wanted to go to the disciplinary council, not in a public forum, but just meet with them privately and show the evidence that we had of Mark Bennett's criminality, and they wouldn't even listen to her. No, you can't come down. Why not? That's your job. Now, I'm not saying you have to rule in our favor. They wouldn't even let us be present or even submit documents to them. This is a total cover-up. So,
and they have qualified immunity, which is another topic that I'm going to be talking about on the podcast, folks. Prosecutors and police, judges have qualified immunity. They can essentially ruin your life. They go about their business, going to lunch and going out to dinner, going to bars, whatever they want to do, while you're sitting miserably with no money trying to defend yourself, and they have qualified immunity. And
right, and it's all a buddy-buddy system, too. I mean, yes, there's immunity, and qualified immunity means if you're acting in your official capacity, you're immune. But Kasaris sleeping with Catherine Clover, that's not his job as a prosecutor, sleep with the witness. Denied. I filed that. Denied. So qualified immunity, it's whatever the judge wants. It's outcomes-based. The justice system is outcomes-based. It has nothing to do with evidence or law or facts. We hate Trump. We love Trump. I mean, we're going to prosecute this. And it's all, we're going after East Cleveland. We're going after Tony Viola. We're setting up a task force. It's all outcomes-based. And the judges don't enforce laws because they don't feel like it because they're buddy. So in this Bennett disbarment, it turns out that there's a Thursday night poker game. The federal judges and the prosecutors, I was never invited, by the way, to the Thursday night poker game. That's called an illegal ex parte communication. It's certainly improper. Don Nugent talks about criminal cases with prosecutors and without me present. That's actually, he should be off the bench. You're not allowed to do that, but they do what they want. Who's going to enforce it? But the thing is that Bennett is playing poker with the judge. Now, I mean, I joked that I wasn't invited, and I didn't. I'm not that good of a poker player. They probably would have beat me anyway. They should have had me there. They probably could have won money. But what the hell's going on here where my life Okay, ruined everything I work for. My business is ruined. They took my house. They took my car. I got out of jail with a jail sweatshirt, okay, and sweatpants. That's what I owned, okay, when I got out of prison. So everything was taken from me, and they're having a good old time playing poker. That is inappropriate. The prosecutors and judges should not be playing poker on Thursday night together. It's ridiculous.
And you can actually include
fair.
What you talked about before. You can actually include some of the defense attorneys. The defense attorneys they joke around with the prosecutors. They joke around with the judges.
Yeah, they're having a great time. It's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous. The defense bar being such a joke is one of the problems in Cleveland too. And you're right about the media, but the defense bar is a joke, and they don't do anything. I mean, Marcus Sidoti's a lawyer. He knows Kasaris is sleeping with witnesses. He doesn't do anything about it. I mean, everybody knows Kasaris is sleeping with the witnesses. Nobody does anything. Peter Patakos won a trial, but he won't take the next step, which is to put Kasaris in jail. Nobody wants to do anything. I've had people tell me, oh, that's Dan. Yeah, he's old school. He does that. What is this, an episode of Mad Men that you're taking liberties with the witnesses? This is ridiculous. So everyone knows about it. Nobody does anything about it. And that's the thing. It's not like my allegations of misconduct aren't established. I mean, our best evidence of criminality is their own words. What Mark Bennett and Dan Kasaris say, it's their words, not me. Their emails about altering documents and perjured testimony is cool. I mean, that's them saying it, the ledger of the restitution. These are government documents. I mean, Dawn said, we're going to destroy the government's case with the government's own documents. By the way, without that girl, I would be in jail. I would have lost the second trial. I'd gotten 30 more years. I'd had 50 years in jail, even though Mark Bennett and Dan Kasaris knew I was innocent the whole time.
And I'm sure, that's how sick it is. They have no conscience. They don't care. They look good. They've furthered their career. That's all their concern is.
Yeah, you don't want to get on Channel 19 News at 6. Yeah. That's the meaning of life. I mean, it's insane. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. So anyway, the only thing you can do, I don't know, they don't understand anything other than being arrested. I mean, if Bennett was arrested and Kasaris, they would probably get that. Short of that, I don't know what you can do. That's why our Change.org petition, and they're pompous assholes, so it's fun. To say they're criminals, they're so arrogant, and they wrap themselves in the American flag. Mark Bennett for the United States of America, Dan Kasaris for the state of Ohio, for the people. Yeah, well, for the people, you're having sex with witnesses, with Catherine Clover and Kelly Connors. So anyway, this has got to stop. And I tell the story not because they already ruined my career and my business and my life and put me in prison. And it was 10 years in jail, 3 years before of hell on earth before the first trial. 2 years of house arrest. I mean, I'm still on these probation restrictions because I haven't had my conviction vacated. It's ridiculous. So I just don't want this to happen to anybody else. I think that we could drive change, and I know you went through hell and other people have gone through hell. So the point is, let's turn something sometimes, and whether you're religious or not, whether you believe in God or not, sometimes maybe the Lord is doing it, or maybe it's just karma, whatever you want to call it. Something bad happens and something good results. Okay, there's a forest fire, all the trees are destroyed, it's awful. You go back 5 years later, there's all these beautiful butterflies and, new. Okay, so maybe something good. And if enough people come together in this area, Cuyahoga County, and say, you know what, we're better than this. Our community is a great community of great people here. We're better than this nonsense, this evil emanating from the Injustice Center. That building needs to be cleaned out. Let's clean house. We get enough people saying this is important to us. Politicians go where the votes are. Okay, if it's popular to say whatever, they'll say it. So saying, look, we don't hate law enforcement, we don't hate police. This is ridiculous, though. This abuse of these rules has got to stop. There's the reason the Constitution was put in was to protect our liberty, and so people don't worry until it happens to them. But it sure happened to too many people.
And I think I 100%. I mean, we share a lot of philosophy. I mean, a lot of people have come to me and said, "Hey, Scott, why do you want to keep digging this up? Just live your life. You didn't go to prison. You should be happy about it." And yeah, I am happy I didn't go to prison. But there was a huge injustice with me. There's a huge injustice going on with 13 law enforcement officers with East Cleveland. Injustice with you, justice with Dawn, and in good conscience, I can't stay silent. And if this causes me more issues, then it causes me more issues. But I can't just idly sit by and allow this to happen. And like
right, I said, injustice is injustice. Okay, it doesn't matter that you didn't go to jail or I went to jail, I went longer, or I got screwed more. Forget that. We need to say that when we're dealing with people's lives and the power of the prosecutor's office to come down on people, that it should be used sparingly, and when it's an issue of public safety or something important. This idea of having this plea agreement factory and this pressure to plead guilty, all these charges and all, this is an abuse of authority. I'm not saying nobody should be prosecuted. I'm not saying, that at all. But this is ridiculous. This is an abuse of power, and the failure to enforce these rules. I don't know. It's a very incestuous thing down there. A lot of these people went to the same law school. They've known each other for 40 years. There's all kinds of horror stories down there. And we can do a show on it if you really want, or your audience wants. But I mean, this has got to stop. And the way it is, with the way you got to bring in a new crew down there to run the show. This whole thing is ridiculous. And like, how about the auditor auditing? How about that for an idea? Like Cuyahoga County, hello, you set up this new form of government for transparency. Oh, we can't audit the prosecutor. Why not? Who funds the prosecutor? The county, right? Yes.
Yes.
The taxpayers of this county. So I mean, it's absurd.
Well, Tony, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I hope we stay in touch. And I did want to also mention, and again, I'll put it, there was a tip line that was started by Seeking Justice video show. I'll make sure that I put that in the post edit. There's a tip line that they have anything relative to Don's case, or probably anything relative to Tony's case. Feel free to use that. And
two last thoughts real quick, if you don't mind. First of all, if this episode airs before June 7th, which I think it will, right? So if you want to have a spaghetti dinner, come. It's $15. Dinner with Dawn. It's about Dawn's family, friends. It's going to be a fun evening. We got gift baskets. We've got door prizes. It's just going to be fun. We're going to brainstorm. We're going to have some spaghetti, which is always good. Anyway, it's at the North Ridgeville VFW. Everybody's welcome to join us. It's going to be a fun evening, so just come on by if you can. If you're looking for something to do.
What day was it?
It's Friday, June 7th. Okay. At the VFW in North Ridgeville. It's family friendly. Doors open at 5. Dinner's at 6. It's not going to be a crazy late night, but it'll be fun and it'll be nice. So anyone who wants to, Dawn wanted all of these cases re-examined. She didn't like any injustice. She didn't just say, "Oh, Tony, you're so great, I'm going to help you." She wanted this reformed. So to honor her memory, one of the things we want to do is, how can we help others? How can we share what we know? Other cases of injustice have taken place that haven't been featured on shows like yours. Tell us about it. Tell us what you think. So everyone's welcome. We'd love to see you June 7th. And then the other thing is, there's a Facebook group called Justice for Dawn. All of it is linked on justicefordawn.com. The Change.org petition, the evidence locker, my website, which is free, TonyViola.com, the Seeking Justice series. So there's a lot of resources there, and we publish it. Not that I want people to stay up all night reading 75,000 pieces of paper, but it may help other people. If Mark Bennett prosecuted hundreds of people, and Dan Kasaris has been a prosecutor for 30 plus years, hundreds of people. Every one of these cases has multiple defendants. If you think that something went wrong in your case and you went or prosecuted by this, we want to share that. We have a great private investigator, a guy named Bob Frederick, super guy, really good, very, very fact-oriented. Let's get some evidence. Let's get some hard evidence. So we got a great investigative crew. We got that tip line, the Seeking Justice tip line. So anyway, all that's linked on those two websites. But this is not a crusade, because I'm not a realtor and the public should riot in the streets. Nobody cares. We're trying to have a larger movement of like-minded folks that say, let's come together and let's change this. It's not impossible to change this. We don't have to have this. We don't have to tolerate this crap. This is wrong. And we need to have proper administration of justice in this community. We are the epicenter of wrongful convictions, of unjust things going on inside the prosecutor's office. It's got to stop. But on my own, I can accomplish nothing. But with Yale Law School, Kim Corral, our private investigator, your show, your audience, our audience, Seeking Justice, Dinner for Dawn, all these things together, now we're talking. And government officials go where the votes are. Politicians go where the votes are. They see a big movement. They're going to jump on board. I mean, maybe out of principle, hopefully out of principle, but it doesn't hurt to have a big Facebook group and a big entourage of people that say, hey, listen, Dawn was not treated correctly, and if we stop it now, we don't want any more Dawns. We don't want any more unjust or wrongful convictions. We don't want any more innocent people in prison. We don't want any more, there's a dead body, but we're not going to look into what happened. There's 3 cell phones, we're not going to collect it. This is unacceptable. It's not acceptable. And so just like you felt compelled to do something, not only are we feeling compelled, but we want to reach out to the community and extend a hand and say, hey, come have dinner with us. We don't have all the answers. We don't have a monopoly on wisdom, but we'd like input from everybody. So Anyway, thanks for featuring this. I really appreciate it, and to your audience for listening.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for episode 10. The guy running my SEO is going to be infuriated with me. He keeps yelling at me for anything over 30, 40 minutes, but I didn't want to split up Tony's message, his interview, any more than it already had been. So I just wanted to get the rest of Tony's interview in. I didn't get an opportunity because of time to go back and give my analyzation of what I thought, which is probably good because I'm still getting a lot of those records in as we speak. I did email the Parma police chief for a response, and I wasn't able to do that until Monday. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to have the ability to respond. And folks, I'm not, as I stated, I know a couple Parma guys. I'm not bashing Parma police at all. Every city, every municipality, every police department goes ups and downs. And, you know, it can all be dependent on manpower or people that are assigned to that police department for that period of time. And the current people on Parma Police Department, I'm not bashing anybody there. I don't want anybody to think. It's just with Dawn's situation, you know, had this occurred again in East Cleveland, and I somebody came to me like Tony and showed me everything that Tony and Dawn's parents have attempted to show Parma. I would hey, listen, it was before my time. It doesn't look like it was handled properly. I'm going to do everything in my power to try to rectify it. And I guess that's what's frustrating to me is it doesn't appear to be happening. And maybe Parma PD is just so upset with Tony. I don't know. But again, you got to make the effort. Give the family deserves some sort of consolation, some sort of ability to find out what happened to their daughter. So again, I'm going to go into hopefully an in-depth analysis, which will probably occupy the majority of the next episode on the reports that I got from Parma Police and the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, as well as the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office. And I have been contacted by a gentleman, and I definitely want to dive into his story as well. I want to get his story out there. And if you're listening, I appreciate your patience with that. And with that, folks, I'm going to bid everybody adieu until next week.